again everyone, welcome back to DIY The Art of Wood. I'm Jeremy. On today's episode I'm going to show you how to fix a broken fish. This fish was made by my cousin Kenny. He made it in shop class in school. It was the very first thing he's ever made out of wood. It's a fish-shaped key holder is what it is. That's what these little hooks are for. You hang your keys on them. And he did a really good job at it, especially for his first attempt at woodworking. And Kenny actually lived with me for a little while. And during the time he was living with me, he and I bonded over carpentry and woodworking. I even taught him a few basic carpentry skills. And here's Kenny right here helping me install the last few pieces of trim on the living room remodel project. Shortly after Kenny lived with me, he moved out of state. He moved to Texas. But he left his fish behind. And I was hanging on to it for him to either mail it back to him or wait for him to come for a visit, and I would give it back to him then. But in the course of moving some stuff around here in the shop and working around in the shop, I accidentally knocked it on the floor and the tip of the tail broke off. Now Kenny's actually coming up for a visit this summer, and I thought it'd be a great idea to put this thing back together for him so I could give it back to him in one piece. So today we're going to put this fish back together for my cousin Kenny. Now, luckily the tail broke off cleanly when it hit the floor. It didn't shatter in a bunch of little pieces that would be difficult to repair. Really all I have to do is basically glue it back together, and if I do a good enough job at it, you probably won't even be able to tell that it was broken. But the catch is, because of the odd shape of the tail, it would be very difficult to get clamps around this. But that's okay, we don't even need clamps. I've got a secret little trick and I'm going to show you how it's done. Now to do this you only need a few simple items. You need a little bit of wood glue, a damp rag to wipe up any glue squeeze out, and the secret weapon, super glue. Now this is Crazy Glue brand. It doesn't really matter what brand you use. Any of the CA glues or super glues will work just fine. And this is what's actually going to take the place of the clamps. It's going to hold the tail in place long enough to let the wood glue dry. So let's get started. So what I'm going to do is apply a little bit of wood glue to the broken part of the tail here, and also add a few drops of super glue in a few places. Now I want to keep the super glue away from the edges because I don't want any of that to squeeze out. That's a little bit harder to clean up. But if any of the wood glue squeezes out, that's totally fine. You can wipe that up with a wet rag. So I'll put some wood glue kind of around the edges here. And spread that around with a brush. Pick these brushes up at Rockler. They're silicone brushes. They work really well. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to pick one of these up for yourself. But just kind of spread it out nice and even, especially around the edges. And then I'm going to add kind of a few drops of the Crazy Glue here in the middle. Set it on a flat surface and then just put it together and hold it while the super glue sets up. And it only takes about 30 seconds for the super glue to set up, so we'll just hold it here for a few seconds. Just make sure your lines line up before you really start to hold it, otherwise you're going to have something that looks a little funky. But I think this is going to turn out just great. Let's give it plenty of time for that super glue to set up. It says 30 seconds, but because it's the only thing holding it together until the wood glue dries, we're going to give it a little bit more time. Okay, let's take it over here. We'll wipe up the wood glue squeeze out on the front here with our wet rag. Make sure we get it all because I don't want to have to sand and refinish this. I don't have to. Then again, when Kenny comes up for a visit, maybe he's going to want to do that here in the shop. I don't know, we'll have to see. I'll leave that up to Kenny. Get off the back too. That looks pretty good, so I'll just set the fish aside for a little while and let the wood glue dry. It should be dry within half an hour or so, and then I can kind of move it and set it aside, not have to, oh, wrong cap. Then I can move it aside, not have to worry about it coming loose or anything. But this Crazy Glue will definitely hold it in place long enough to let the wood glue do its job. And here, I'll bring it in for a close-up so we can see the results here. See, it's almost a perfect, now the wood's a little differently colored because it's slightly damp, but it's almost a perfectly repaired joint. You can barely, if you maybe get a microscope out, you can see the crack, but since this thing broke so cleanly, it's almost a perfect repair. And so that's pretty much it. If you've got something at home, a decorative item like this that is broken, you don't have to make a new one, you don't have to throw it out. You can probably repair it with just a few simple items that you can pick up at the hardware store. Crazy glue, wood glue, and you're done. So I'll see you on the next video. So today we're going to put this thing back together. Now luckily it broke cleanly when it hit the floor. It didn't, Now this fish was made by my cousin Kenny in shop class. A loud car. On today's episode, I'm going to show you how to fix. That didn't go well.